When the universe sinks into chaos, when worlds stand on the brink of annihilation, only humanity remains resilient, never backing down. Blood is spilled, sacrifices are countless, but in every warrior is an unwavering belief. This battle is not just for survival. It is a battle of resilience, boundless sacrifice, and determination that cannot be defeated. Are you strong enough to face this challenge? Subscribe now to not miss the battle. Only the resilient warriors will triumph. Planet Varellia, a peaceful paradise where civilizations of peace coexist. Verdant fields, ancient forests, and crystal-clear seas paint a vibrant picture, almost indestructible. However, its fragility lies deep within its heart. In the darkness of the universe where powerful civilizations rise, Varellia is but one of many nameless planets constantly under siege by those who hunger for power and domination. They will come. We can't escape, Captain Jason Carter muttered, his eyes filled with despair. He gazed into the vast blackness of space where the stars could never shine through the thick darkness the Moilrath invasion force would bring. For Carter, it was already too late. His heart beat harder with each passing second, not out of fear, but from the rage and hopelessness that had built up over years. The Moilrath invaders who never knew mercy, who had stolen his family, shattered humanity's last hopes. Carter was part of the war, but this time he was no longer just a soldier. He was the leader of an army of the forgotten, those no one expected could stand up against such a ruthless empire. "Get ready, everyone!" Carter shouted, his voice echoing through the command room, where officers and soldiers stood at attention. But beneath the hardened exterior, they all felt the unease creeping into their minds. These soldiers had never fought like this. They had never faced an enemy as brutal as the Moilrath. In that moment, Carter recalled the early days of the war. His homeworld had been attacked, its grand cities, familiar houses, all reduced to rubble, burning in an inferno. Loved ones, lost friends, and fellow soldiers fallen at the feet of the enemy. And he could still remember the sensation when the last light flickered out, leaving nothing but the overwhelming darkness. Carter took a deep breath, forcing himself not to break. "It's time," he told himself. "There's nothing left to lose." As humanity's army left their homeworld, Varellia was left behind, its once thriving fields now empty, the homes of millions of lives gone. They boarded their ships not to seek glory or protection for themselves, but because they might be the last hope for another planet. But they knew, confronting the Moilrath, such a mighty empire was unimaginable. The human warship Prometheus sailed through the dark void, passing through hazardous territories, unaware of what awaited them ahead. On the bridge, Lieutenant Elena Voss stood quietly staring at the tactical screen, where red dots from the Moilrath fleet began to appear. Each of the Moilrath's ships was a massive war machine engineered for destruction. They were not merely warships, but mobile fortresses housing millions of soldiers and weapons of mass destruction, capable of obliterating an entire planetary system. These ships were the embodiment of terror throughout the universe. "We're getting close," Elena whispered, but no one responded. Everyone could feel the anticipation before the storm. An unshakable anxiety was spreading across the ship, like a disease that couldn't be seen. As Prometheus drew closer to the Moilrath system, they realized things were far worse than they had imagined. The scene before them was one of unimaginable devastation. The planets that the Moilrath had passed through were nothing but ruins and bones. Skulls of creatures, cities buried beneath rubble, clear evidence of the enemy's brutality. "We're all going to die here," one soldier whispered, his voice trembling. But Carter did not falter. He looked at his troops, their eyes filled with doubt, but also determination. Each one of them had lost something, and they couldn't turn back. They were here not just to die, but to do something far greater to stop the evil that was spreading across the universe. The battle began. Humanity's forces launched into combat with tactics never seen before. The Moilrath had superior firepower, but they were unprepared for the unexpected assaults and clever strategies of humanity. One by one, soldiers fell in brutal skirmishes. Explosions rang out across the battlefield, waves of fire consuming everything. Blood soaked the ground. The sounds of roaring gunfire and bombs deafened the surroundings. It was a battle where no one knew who would survive. The human warriors continued fighting, even though they knew their chances of survival were almost zero. "Don't retreat," Carter shouted as he watched his best friend fall in an explosion. Blood splattered everywhere, a part of his friend's body torn apart by debris from a shattered ship. But there was no time to mourn. Death was part of this war. We fight for those who haven't died, for those who need us. The battle raged for hours, and the battlefield was filled with corpses. The human warriors, though vastly outnumbered, had made the Maelrath stop. Not because of strength, but because of humanity's resilience. Despite facing death, they kept rising and fighting. No fear, no retreat. It was in that moment that the Maelrath invaders realized something they had never considered: humanity, with all its supposed weaknesses, could make an entire empire tremble in fear. As Prometheus traversed the dark void of space, the faint glimmers of distant stars could not chase away the fear rising in the hearts of the human army. The Maelrath warships were not just fighting machines. They were instruments of destruction, designed to annihilate everything, leaving nothing but ash. No mercy, no compassion. This was a war not to survive, but to exterminate. "What do we do when we get there?" Elena Voss asked, her sharp eyes fixed on the tactical screen. Known for her decisive nature, even she could not hide the tension she felt about the inevitable fate ahead. Carter stood on the bridge, his hands clenched tightly. He did not answer Voss's question immediately. His gaze was fixed on the distant void of space where the Maelrath fleet awaited. His heart was filled with worry, but not from fear. He feared that when everything ended, humanity would have nothing left to protect. "We'll fight until the very last moment," Carter said, his voice as cold as stone. "But we won't wait to die. We'll do whatever we can fight in ways they won't expect." Soon after, Prometheus exited hyperspace and emerged into the Maelrath system. The sight before them made everyone aboard shudder. The Maelrath were not an unknown empire. They had conquered countless planets, leaving behind indelible marks, planets reduced to wastelands. And this time, Varellia would not be an exception. The systems around them had already been attacked. "Warning, Prometheus, warning! We are being tracked!" Lieutenant Voss yelled, making Carter turn back. Sudden signals from the tactical scan device flared up. Red dots appeared on the screen, dense and countless. They had found them. "This is a trap," Carter muttered. "We can't avoid this fight." The moment the alarm blared, the Maelrath fleet launched into battle. Each of their massive warships rose like monsters, thick and colossal, with their cannons shooting dazzling laser beams. Blinding rays of light tore through space, smashing into the ships and shattering everything in their path. The Maelrath forces were overwhelming and overpowering, but humanity did not retreat. Prometheus was a tiny ship, almost incomparable in size and strength, but to Carter it was their only hope. "Focus fire on the smaller ships," Carter ordered through the communication system, his eyes not leaving the screen. "Acknowledge." Voss responded coldly. Humanity's forces, though lacking in superior firepower, fought with an unimaginable resolve. They were not fighting for glory, but for themselves, for those standing on the brink of annihilation. And the battle began brutal and savage. The Maelrath ships were not just vehicles of war. Each one was a mobile fortress capable of obliterating an entire city with a single strike. The sound of explosions reverberated, shaking the space around them. Brilliant flames erupted on the surface of the ships, making the atmosphere feel even heavier. "Watch out!" "Right ahead," Elena screamed as a heavy Maelrath bomb whizzed past the ship. Prometheus shook violently, and several soldiers fell to the ground as the ship swayed. "Don't stop! Keep fighting!" Carter roared, urging the remaining crew. "Bloodfire! and the screeching of artillery. Step by step, Prometheus advanced into the heart of the male wrath formation. The human warriors fired back, undeterred by danger. No one knew if they would survive facing this overwhelming force, but they fought as if they had nothing to lose. A soldier named Sergeant Miller in humanity's army lost both of his arms in the first battle. Despite the blood pouring from his wounds, he kept fighting, using his feet to control his weapon, biting the ammunition to load it, never stopping for a moment. Nothing could stop him. No pain could make him fall. He kept fighting for one reason alone, for peace. As the battle raged on Lord Azrath, the Milewrath commander stood on the bridge of their largest warship, watching the attack unfold. He mocked those who were risking their lives. They fight like wild animals, but they don't know they are only prolonging their doom. The humans will never understand us, Azrath continued, speaking coldly. Power doesn't come from compassion. It comes from ruthlessness. But just then, a group of human warships under the command of Captain O'Connell approached from behind and attacked one of the Milewrath warships. The gunfire erupted, bombs exploded on the ship, and in just seconds, the Milewrath ship was severely damaged. It was a blow that sent ripples through the entire Milewrath fleet. We are not animals, Carter thought quietly, as he observed the battle from Prometheus's bridge. We are warriors, and we will fight until nothing remains but dust. The atmosphere on Prometheus had grown heavy, like a thick fog hanging over them. After each Milewrath assault, the human soldiers were left as mere shadows of themselves, battered bodies, eyes bloodshot from exhaustion and pain. There was no time to mourn, no room for fear. One by one they fell, but they never retreated. We cannot afford to fail. Captain Carter clenched his fists, his gaze cold and sharp as steel. He stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical screen where red dots crowded the display, a reminder of their hopeless situation. A massive explosion shook Prometheus, causing the ship to tremble violently. Warning signals flashed on the console, reflecting off Carter's face, threatening to shatter his mind. But he had no time to look back at the past or question why he was here. The Milewrath knew no mercy and understood nothing of pain. They only knew victory. But humanity, though weaker in numbers and firepower, had learned to fight in ways no one expected. Advance, Carter ordered. We cannot stop now. Outside the ship, the battlefield raged on like an endless war. The Milewrath warships, armed with their destructive cannons, continued to unleash fire upon humanity's forces. The Milewrath ships, large and powerful, could obliterate entire cities with a single shot. But aboard Prometheus, the soldiers had no such overwhelming firepower. What did they have but courage and sacrifice? We won't survive, Lieutenant Elena Voss whispered, but then she pushed the fear aside. If we cannot survive, at least we won't die in vain. Exactly, Carter replied, his eyes locked on the tactical screen, unwavering. No one will forget what we've done. No one can erase this memory. In a sudden assault, Sergeant Miller, a soldier known for his bravery and resilience, witnessed a scene he had never imagined. Prometheus was partially shattered by the attack, causing massive energy gas leaks, followed by horrific explosions. Miller had no way out. But with all his determination, he ran into the fire, grabbed his sidearm, and fought to the end. Nothing can stop us. Miller growled, blood pouring from his wounds, but he did not stop. His eyes were locked on his target, and a barrage of bullets shot through space, tearing apart the enemy ship's hull. The image of blood dripping from each of his steps. But he felt no pain, only a singular desire to destroy the enemy. At that moment, Lord Azrath, the Milewrath commander, watched from the screen of his flagship, his eyes gleaming with amusement. The human forces were fighting desperately without fear, but with a battle so unequal, he knew it was just a matter of time before they would fall. They fight like wild animals. Azrath mocked, his eyes cold, devoid of emotion. They have never known true strength. But just then, a noise broke his self-satisfied thoughts. Prometheus suddenly appeared from behind the Milewrath formation. like a ghost that could not be predicted. The human warship's guns fired again, but this time the strikes were fast and deadly. Prometheus did not have the power of Maelrath's warships, but surprise was humanity's greatest weapon. "We'll fight like we've never fought before," Carter said, as the commander of Prometheus pinpointed weak points in the Maelrath formation. "Target their ships' ambush tactics," Carter shouted, his eyes fixed on the red dots on the screen. The Maelrath's brutality did not make him hesitate. He knew that if they did not act, everything would be lost. The battle unfolded like a ceaseless bloodbath. The Maelrath ships, though mighty, were attacked unexpectedly from directions they could not anticipate. The human warships pressed the attack, causing the enemy to lose their bearings. The Maelrath soldiers were ambushed, panicking, and unable to respond. The scene was so chaotic that no one knew what was happening. Bloodfire and smoke enveloped the battlefield, and the air was filled only with the roar of war. "We will not retreat," Voss yelled, her throat tight with labored breath, but her eyes sparkled with resolve. "As long as we breathe, we will fight." Despite the suffering and devastation, humanity did not retreat. Captain Carter and his army, though outnumbered and outgunned, fought as if there was nothing to lose. The Maelrath warships were destroyed one by one, but the price was high. Soldiers fell their blood, staining the surface of space, leaving red streaks like memories that would never fade. The battle continued relentlessly, and when it finally stopped, no one could see the ground. Only shadows remained, the blood-soaked remnants of humanity. Lord Azrath, though equipped with unimaginable power, now faced an army of resolve that he could not understand. In the final hours of the battle, Prometheus pushed back the Maelrath fleet, forcing the invaders to retreat. But this victory was not one of joy. It was the end of a part of the war, but also the beginning of losses and sacrifices that could never be filled. The war between humanity and the Maelrath had entered a bloody and brutal phase. Prometheus, the small warship, had now become a symbol of resilience, but its strength could not indefinitely withstand the might of the Maelrath Empire. The battle in space had become a bloody symphony, where every note was an explosion, flashes of light from cannons and endless deaths spilling out into the void. Captain Carter stood firm on the bridge, his eyes never leaving the tactical screen. The wounds on his body were bleeding, but he felt nothing but an overwhelming cold. His heart no longer beat with fear. It beat only for one goal: victory, even if it cost him his life. "Warning!" Lieutenant Voss shouted. "The Maelrath warships are attacking with intense force. The pressure is increasing by the minute." "Hold the line," Carter ordered, his eyes sharp as a blade. "We have no place to retreat. This is the last time we face them." Outside, space shattered under the devastating attack of the Maelrath. Their colossal warships tore apart the sky with explosions of fire and smoke, but humanity remained undeterred. The soldiers, though severely wounded, kept fighting relentlessly. Miller, a Marine, despite a bullet wound to his abdomen, continued to lead his squad forward, not allowing a single step to fall back. "Nothing can stop us," Miller shouted over the comms, blood leaking from his body, but he paid it no mind. "We fight for what matters most: freedom, dignity, and for those we love." Miller charged into an assault, breaking through the defenses of a smaller Maelrath ship, using the last of his strength to defeat an invading force. Though his body was nearly spent, what he left behind was a glorious victory. Unbelievable. Azrath, the Maelrath commander, watched on the screen as one of his warships was destroyed by Prometheus. He couldn't believe that such a small human force could stand against a great empire like his. "We must end this immediately," Azrath roared. "The price of their resilience will be their death." Azrath's orders were implemented at once. His fleet began pouring all their firepower into Prometheus, and the human ship began to shake violently. The relentless Maelrath assaults made the crew aboard Prometheus feel as though the entire universe was collapsing around them. "We can't stop. We can't let them win," Carter screamed, pointing at the screen. "We must destroy them! We must destroy the male wrath!" The battle grew fiercer, with no sign of stopping. Blood and fire consumed everything. Prometheus, with the courage and determination of its crew, charged straight into the male wrath formation, attacking like an uncontrollable storm. The soldiers aboard the ship, with nothing but injuries and exhaustion, still fought on. In the midst of the chaos, Carter received an unusual signal from Earth, a coded message from Admiral Brooks. The message was clear. "Carter, if you fail in this mission, the entire universe will fall into darkness. Hold strong even if it costs everything." The message hit Carter's spirit like a powerful blow. Those words weren't just an order. They were a promise that even in death, humanity's warriors would live on in the universe's memory. The battle entered its most brutal phase. Prometheus was surrounded by the giant Maelrath warships. The Maelrath's guns continued to fire relentlessly at the ship, causing the shields of Prometheus to weaken. Each attack was a deadly blow to the human forces. A loud explosion rang out. One of the Maelrath destroyers rammed straight into Prometheus, damaging part of the ship's structure. Carter saw part of the bridge shatter and soldiers were trapped. He ran without hesitation into the flames to rescue his comrades. "We can't let them die in vain," Carter shouted. He pulled a wounded soldier from the rubble despite the smoke and gunfire whizzing by his head. Meanwhile, Miller continued his fight with madness. At this point, he no longer felt pain. Every heartbeat urged him to fight. With one final strike, he charged into a Maelrath ship, destroying it from the inside out, sending the enemy into disarray. "This is the strength of humanity," Miller whispered, his breath coming in short gasps. "They will know we will never bow." In a final moment, Prometheus charged into the Maelrath warship formation. Carter could only think of victory within his grasp, knowing that the price would be high. Explosions rang out everywhere, shattering everything in sight. But in every step they took, there was something the Maelrath could never expect: courage and absolute sacrifice. When the final battle ended, Prometheus lay motionless on the battlefield. But the Maelrath fleet had been defeated. The human warriors, though most had fallen, would live on in the galaxy's memory. The Maelrath could not win, not because of humanity's overwhelming strength, but because of their courage. The universe was a chaotic mix of light, fire, and death. Prometheus continued to fight, despite the severe damage to its hull, and the fact that humanity's forces were now a mere fraction of their original strength. The soldiers aboard the ship were nearly exhausted, but the determination in their eyes still burned brightly. Every time they landed on a new world, a part of their blood was spilled, but they never stopped. "There is no choice. We must press forward," Captain Carter shouted, his eyes locked onto the tactical screen where the red dots kept moving. He could see the Maelrath warships surrounding Prometheus. Their guns fired beams of light, slicing through space like sharp blades. Carter knew that this battle would not only decide the fate of humanity, but also the entire galaxy. Once the Maelrath completed their mission to destroy Prometheus, they wouldn't stop. They would wipe everything out. Meanwhile, Sergeant Miller continued to fight on the ground, where the battles raged fiercely. Maelrath's forces were landing on surrounding planets, slaughtering everything in their path. Miller led his Marine squad, shooting through each layer of enemies, allowing no one to survive. "Marines, fight to the last drop of blood!" Miller shouted, his rifle firing relentlessly at the Maelrath soldiers. No one in his squad stopped, even though they were exhausted. They fought not because they could survive, but for the freedom of innocent people being pushed to the brink of annihilation. "This is for life!" another Marine yelled, leaping onto an enemy ship to attack from within. The Maelrath soldiers were caught off guard and swiftly cut down by the lightning-fast attacks. The frenzy continued, blood flowing like rivers on the ground, but none of the soldiers stopped. They continued to push forward step by step, like indomitable warriors fighting for a dying world. Back on Prometheus, Carter received a signal from Admiral Brooks. she said, "We're getting close. But if you don't take down the Maelrath now, we won't have another chance. We will complete the mission." Carter responded, his voice firm. But deep inside, he knew that the chance of success was slim. Prometheus had only a fraction of its power and life left, but in the final moment, all hope rested on him. He ordered his forces to prepare for the final assault. All they had left was courage and tactics unlike anything the Maelrath had ever faced. Prometheus would fight until the end, no matter the cost. The battle resumed with even more ferocity. Prometheus charged into the Maelrath formation, one ship against an entire fleet. The Maelrath ships, with their destructive firepower and overwhelming certainty of victory, could not anticipate the deadly blows humanity was about to deliver. "Kill them!" Azrath roared over the comms, ordering his fleet to attack Prometheus. But Prometheus was no longer just a warship. It had become a symbol of resilience, of warriors who had sacrificed everything to protect what was left of humanity. Wave after wave of attacks erupted, but Prometheus did not falter. The smaller human ships, with their speed and surprise tactics, tore into the enemy formation. The massive Maelrath warships couldn't respond in time, being struck from every direction. The human guns ripped through the battlefield, cutting through the enemy's defenses. The frenzy of war reached its peak. The sight of humans fighting like wild animals, but with intelligence and unwavering resolve, made the Maelrath tremble. Carter ordered Prometheus to ram into the largest Maelrath ship, destroying it from the inside out, creating a massive explosion that shook the entire battlefield. "We will not retreat!" Carter shouted as he gripped the controls, steering Prometheus into the enemy formation. Each Maelrath ship was torn apart by an unstoppable force. Azrath, the leader of the Maelrath, growled in anger. "These humans are too strong, they cannot be defeated." But his warships could no longer withstand the furious onslaught of humanity. The price of his arrogance was too high, and he was forced to watch as his fleet was destroyed. "We will not accept defeat," Azrath yelled, but in his eyes now was fear, something he had never felt before. The Maelrath were being swept away. Carter, though, exhausted, held firm in his resolve. Finally, after a series of brutal strikes, Prometheus completely destroyed the Maelrath fleet. But this victory did not come without a cost. The hull of Prometheus was torn apart, many sections of the ship were blackened by fire, and Carter's forces were nearly all lost. When it was over, there was only silence on the battlefield. The Maelrath system had been defeated, but the price was too high. The human warriors, though they had sacrificed everything, could not forget the pain of their losses. The universe where the bloody battles had just ended was now a place of eerie silence. Prometheus had won, but the cost was devastating. Carter, the last commander, stood firm amidst the wreckage of his own warship, where only destruction and corpses remained. The Maelrath had been defeated, but in this moment, humanity's victory felt like a flame burning fiercely in the midst of a storm. The blood of the warriors aboard Prometheus had soaked deeply into the ship's hull. Miller, the last surviving Marine, stood on the bridge staring at the tactical screen. The sight on the screen was filled with the wreckage of destroyed Maelrath ships, but all knew that in the aftermath of war, there were things that could never be healed. "We've won." Miller whispered, a tear rolling down his face, but then he shook his head as if to push away the emptiness and the pain that could not be healed. Carter stood next to him, but his eyes no longer glowed with hope. "We've won, but the price was too high," he said. "But at least we've done something that even the Maelrath could never understand. We did not give up." The silence in space remained even as the battlefield outside plunged into darkness. The human warriors, though they fought to the end, now had to face the deaths of their closest comrades. The wounds of Prometheus could not be healed, but it still stood tall as a symbol of sacrifice, a reminder of the unbreakable strength of humanity. With the Maelrath ships completely destroyed, The world where Prometheus and the human forces planted their victory flag was becoming a graveyard without a single sigh, only the faint glow of sacrifice. But this battle wasn't just about the destruction of the enemy. It was also about rebirth. In the days that followed, as the first sunlight once again bathed Prometheus, humanity's forces no longer fought. They spent the days rebuilding what had been lost, healing the wounds, and restoring what had been destroyed. They proved one thing, that even at the cost of everything, humanity could rise again after every battle. With the help of Admiral Brooks and their allies, Prometheus was restored like a phoenix rising from the ashes. The Milrath system had been wiped out, and humanity began to rebuild what had been lost. But the ghosts of war could not leave them. The warriors, though they had returned to life, still carried invisible wounds, memories of sacrifice, of the deaths of dear friends, of victories and losses. And in their hearts, there was always a question that could never be answered. Was it worth it when everything had been so brutal? Thus, after a long and bloody journey, Prometheus and humanity had won. But the price was too steep. Each wave of blood, each body, each pain that words couldn't express, all of it, had been etched into the memories of the surviving warriors. We may ask, was the victory worth the sacrifice? But one thing is certain. In the heart of every warrior, the price of freedom. The price of resilience is always greater than everything else. If this story has touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this journey. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts on battles in life, resilience, and sacrifice. Thank you for walking this path with us. We've won, but we continue to fight. Stand firm like the warriors and remember, sometimes resilience is not about the final victory. It's about never giving up, even at the cost of everything. Don't forget to like and share if you feel this story deserves to be shared with the world. Wishing you strength and resilience.